gilded heart of the celestial dominion, where spires of iridescent crystal pierced the violet-hued sky and rivers of liquid light flowed through marble courtyards, Princess Varel of House Solmara stood trembling behind the silk-draped archway of the grand receiving hall. Her emerald skin shimmered faintly under the ambient glow of hovering luminoorbs, and her wild cascade of fiery orange hair, braided with threads of starlight silver, framed a face taut with dread. She had spent the last 3 nights sleepless, haunted not by nightmares of war or loss, but by the man she was to marry at dawn, a human soldier named Joran Vale. Joran was not royalty. He was not even an alien noble. He was a Terran, a species once dismissed by the Dominion as primitive, chaotic, and emotionally volatile. Yet it was this very human who had carried Varel from the smoldering ruins of the Battle of Xylo's Ridge after her royal skiff crashed during an assassination attempt. While her own guards fled or fell, Joran, an off-world mercenary contracted to the Neutral Mediation Corps, had dragged her bleeding body across scorched dunes, shielded her from plasma fire with his own back, and whispered reassurances in broken Salmaran until medics arrived. For that act, the Empress Dowager had decreed a union. Varel would wed her savior, binding Terran loyalty to the Solmara bloodline. Varel had protested, not out of ingratitude but terror. Humans, according to Dominion archives, were unpredictable. They laughed too loudly, touched without permission, spoke of love like it was a weapon. Worse, they didn't understand honor-bound silence or the sacred weight of royal duty. To be tied to one, especially a battle-scarred warrior with calloused hands and eyes that held storms, felt like being handed to a beast draped in civility. Now, standing in the antechamber of the Sunstone throne room, Varel clutched the ceremonial dagger hidden beneath her gown, not to harm him, but to remind herself she still had control. The wedding rites would begin soon. Protocol demanded she greet her betrothed alone before the ceremony. A tradition meant to foster trust. She expected arrogance, maybe even leering. What she did not expect was Joran kneeling. He wasn't in armor. Instead, he wore simple white linen woven with silver thread, the Terran equivalent of formal wear, she'd been told, and his dark hair was neatly combed, though a stubborn lock still fell over his brow. When he saw her, he dropped to one knee, head bowed, palms open on his thighs. No words, no demands, just stillness. Varel blinked. "You kneel." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "In my world," Joran said softly, without looking up, "when you meet someone greater than yourself, you lower your eyes. Not because you're weak, but because you recognize their worth." She stared. No Solmari noble had ever knelt to her unless commanded. Even her father, the late emperor, had treated her more as a political asset than a person. "I am not greater," she said, stepping forward despite herself. "I am afraid." That made him lift his gaze. His eyes, warm brown, flecked with gold like desert sand at sunset, held no mockery, only quiet understanding. "So am I," he admitted. The honesty disarmed her. She had braced for bravado, for boasts of battlefield glory. Instead, here was a man who carried courage like a quiet flame, not a roaring inferno. Slowly, she extended a hand. He took it, not with a grip, but with reverence, and rose. His touch was gentle, yet firm enough to steady her trembling fingers. Over the next few days, while courtiers buzzed with gossip and ministers plotted how to sideline the Terran interloper, Joran did something astonishing. He asked nothing of her. He didn't demand intimacy, titles, or influence. Instead, he wandered the palace gardens, learning the names of alien flora from elderly botanists. He sat with kitchen staff during meals, laughing at their jokes about spoiled nobles. He even helped repair a broken aqua conduit in the servants' wing using tools cobbled from scrap metal, earning grins and shared fruit from workers who'd never spoken to a royal consort before. Varel watched from balconies and doorways, torn between suspicion and fascination. One evening, she found him in the starlight courtyard, feeding crumbs to a flock of moon-feathered avians. She approached silently, arms crossed. "You don't act like a husband," she said. He tossed another crumb. "Didn't think you wanted one yet." "I don't know what I want," she confessed, surprising herself. "My whole life has been mapped. Lessons, alliances, heirs. Now you're here, and nothing makes sense." Joran turned fully to her then. "Then let's make new sense," he offered. "No scripts, no expectations, just two people figuring it out." It sounded dangerously naive. And yet, when he smiled soft, unguarded, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, she felt something inside her crack open. Their first real conversation happened during a minor crisis. A delegation from the rival Kthar hive arrived unannounced, demanding reparations for alleged border violations. Tensions flared in the council chamber. Varel, trained since childhood in diplomatic frost, delivered a flawless rebuttal, but her hands shook afterward. Alone in her private observatory, she paced, muttering curses in 3 languages. Joran appeared in the doorway holding 2 steaming mugs. "Chamomile blend," he said, "with a splash of honey root syrup. Supposedly calms nerves." She eyed the mug suspiciously. "How do you know our calming herbs?" asked the head medic. "Also bribed a gardener with Terran chocolate." He grinned. "Turns out your people love cocoa." She almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she took the mug, their fingers brushing. The warmth seeped into her palms. "They called me the green doll today," she murmured. "Said I speak pretty words but have no spine." Joran's expression darkened. "Want me to challenge their ambassador to a duel?" "No," she startled, then softened. "But, thank you for offering." She paused. "Why do you care?" "Because you're not a doll," he said simply. "You're Varel, who stays up memorizing star charts to impress her dead father, who hides extra rations for the orphan stable children, who cried for 3 hours after her pet glimmer lizard died, even though court etiquette forbids public grief." He shrugged. "I pay attention." Tears pricked her eyes. No one had ever seen those things. No one had ever looked. Weeks passed. The forced marriage remained unconsummated, not out of coldness, but mutual respect. Joran slept in the adjoining chamber, always leaving the connecting door ajar, in case you need anything. Varel began leaving notes on his pillow. Sketches of constellations, translations of Terran poetry, once a pressed flower from her mother's garden. He replied with doodles of ridiculous creatures, earth dragons, he called them, and recipes for pancakes, which palace chefs attempted and failed to replicate. Then came the night of the Blood Moon Festival. Traditionally, newlyweds performed the dance of twin flames beneath the crimson sky, a ritual symbolizing unity. Varel dreaded it. Public displays of affection were expected. Hesitation would be seen as rejection. But as the drums began and guests gathered in the crystal amphitheater, Joran took her hand and whispered, "Just follow my lead, and if I step on your toes, blame Earth gravity." What followed wasn't perfection. He missed a turn. She stumbled on her train. But they laughed, real, breathless laughter that echoed off the crystalline walls. At one point, he spun her so fast her orange hair fanned out like fire, and when he caught her, his arms were sure, his eyes bright with joy. The crowd fell silent, then erupted in applause. Not for the dance, but for the unexpected tenderness between them. Afterward, in the quiet of her chambers, Varel finally asked the question burning in her chest. "Why are you so kind to me? You could have taken advantage, claimed power, demanded tribute. But you treat me like I matter." Joran sat on the edge of a divan, elbows on knees. "Back on Earth," he began slowly. "I grew up in the dust wastes, nothing but rust and wind. My parents died when I was 10. I survived by stealing scraps, sleeping in gutted transports. One day, an old woman caught me trying to steal bread from her stall. Instead of calling enforcers, she fed me, gave me a blanket, said, 'Hunger doesn't make you bad. It just makes you hungry.'" He looked up. "That kindness saved me, so I figured, maybe I could pass it on." Varel's breath hitched. Without thinking, she crossed the room and knelt before him, taking his rough hands in hers. "Don't be afraid," she whispered. The very words he'd spoken to her on the battlefield now returned. He squeezed her fingers. "I'm not. But peace, especially in galactic courts, is fragile." Days later, encrypted messages surfaced. Kthar agents had infiltrated the palace. Worse, evidence suggested a faction within the Solmari High Council conspired with them, aiming to discredit Varel by framing Joran as a spy. The proof? A data crystal planted in his quarters, containing schematics of Dominion defense grids. Arrest came at dawn. Joran didn't resist as armored guards dragged him away, but his eyes locked with Varel's. Steady, trusting. That trust shattered her. She stormed the High Council chamber, robes swirling like emerald flames. "You accuse him without trial? Without witness?" she thundered. "He saved my life. Yours too, Lord Vexer. You were trapped in that convoy at Xylos." Lord Vexer, a hawk-faced elder with venomous ambition, sneered. Sentiment clouds judgment, Your Highness. Humans are inherently treacherous. Perhaps your affection blinds you. I don't love him, she snapped, then froze. The word hung in the air, heavy and true. She did. Somewhere between shared mugs of herbal tea and clumsy dances under blood moons, she'd fallen for the human who treated her like a person, not a prize. That realization fueled her next move. While the council debated Joran's execution, Varel activated her mother's secret network. Loyal spies, retired generals, even a rogue AI librarian. Within hours, they uncovered the truth. The data crystal's encryption bore Cthar biosignatures, and Lord Vexer's private accounts showed massive credits transferred from Hive coffers. Confrontation came in the throne room. Varel presented the evidence before the entire court, her voice ringing with imperial authority. Vexer lunged for a hidden blade, but Joran, released moments earlier, intercepted him with a move so swift it blurred. He disarmed the traitor without striking, pinning him with calm efficiency. "See," Joran said to the stunned assembly. "Humans can be civilized." Laughter rippled through the room, nervous at first, then genuine. Even the sternest ministers cracked smiles. Later, alone in the palace gardens, Varel found Joran staring at the twin moons. "You could have left," she said. "After everything." He turned, moonlight catching the scar on his cheek. "A souvenir from Xylos. And miss your terrible pancake critiques?" "Never." She stepped closer. "What if I told you I don't want this marriage to be just political anymore?" His breath stilled. "I'd say it hasn't been political for a long time." She reached up, tracing the scar with trembling fingers. "Then stay. Not as my consort, not as my savior, but as mine." He covered her hand with his. "Always." Yet their trials weren't over. The Cthar hive, exposed and enraged, mobilized its fleet along the border. Were loomed. But this time, Varel wouldn't stand behind walls. With Joran at her side, now officially named royal strategist and protector, she rallied allies, reformed defenses, and broadcast a message across the galaxy. The Celestial Dominion would protect all its people, human or Solmari, noble or servant. In quieter moments, they planned a future beyond war. A nursery with windows facing the sunrise. A library filled with Terran and Solmari tales. Children with emerald skin and warm brown eyes, who'd laugh at their father's pancake disasters and memorize constellations with their mother. One evening, as they walked the palace ramparts, Joran slipped a simple band onto her finger, forged from meteor iron and Terran silver. "No grand ceremony," he said. "Just us." Varel kissed him then, under stars older than empires, and knew fear had no place here. Only hope, only love, and the promise of many tomorrows, built not on duty, but on the quiet, extraordinary kindness of a human who saw her, and chose her long before she dared choose herself. The fragile peace that had settled over the Celestial Dominion like morning mist soon began to fray at the edges. Though Lord Vexer's conspiracy had been exposed and the Cthar border tensions momentarily cooled by Varel's bold diplomacy, whispers slithered through the palace corridors, whispers not of war this time, but of prophecy. It began with the Oracle of Zintra, an ancient seer cloaked in living vines and rarely seen outside her floating sanctuary in the Veil Nebula. She arrived unannounced one twilight, her vessel humming with bioluminescent energy as it descended into the sunstone courtyard. The court gasped. Oracles never left their sanctuaries unless the fate of a bloodline hung in the balance. Varel received her in the Hall of Echoing Stars, Joran standing just behind her right shoulder, not as a guard, but as her equal. The oracle's eyes, milky white yet piercing, fixed on them both. "The stars weep," she intoned, voice layered with echoes of 1,000 lifetimes. "A child of fire and earth shall rise, but only if the bond is true. If doubt remains, the Dominion will fall not to war, but to silence." Before Varel could ask what that meant, the oracle pressed a smooth obsidian egg into her hands and vanished in a swirl of pollen and starlight. That night, Varel lay awake, the egg warm against her chest. Joran, sensing her unrest, slipped into her chamber without knocking, something he'd never done before. "You're scared," he said, not as a question. "I don't understand the prophecy," she admitted. "Child of fire and earth. Fire is Solmari blood. Orange hair, desert-born. Earth, that's you. But how can a child be born of two species so different? Our biologies barely align." The medics said conception was near impossible. Joran sat on the edge of her bed, moonlight painting silver lines across his jaw. Near impossible isn't impossible. He hesitated. There's something I haven't told you. Her heart stuttered. On Earth, he began slowly, before I joined the Mediation Corps, I was part of a classified bioadaptation program. After the dust wastes radiation poisoned half my generation, scientists spliced human DNA with extremophile organisms, things that survive in lava vents, deep ice, vacuum. They called us resilient strain. We heal faster, adapt quicker, and he met her eyes. Our genetic code became flexible, compatible with more than just humans. Varel stared. You're saying you can give me a child? I'm saying I didn't know if it would work with your people. I didn't want to raise hope just to break it. He looked down. But maybe that's what the oracle meant. Tears welled in her eyes. Not of sorrow, but of awe. For weeks, they danced around intimacy, bound by respect but haunted by uncertainty. Now, possibility bloomed between them like night-blooming Solanis. They consummated their marriage beneath the twin moons, not with ceremony, but with quiet reverence. Afterward, Varel rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady drum of his heart. If a child comes, she whispered, we name her Lyra, after the first star my mother showed me. He kissed her forehead. And if it's a boy, we'll call him Rian. Means little king in Old Terran. But he'll be raised to serve, not rule. She smiled. For the first time, the future felt real. But fate, it seemed, demanded sacrifice. 3 months later, during a routine scan at the Royal Biosanctum, the chief medic, a stoic elder named Zal, paused mid-readout, his fronds trembling. Your Highness, you are with child. Joy surged, until Zal added, voice grave. But the gestation is accelerating unnaturally. At this rate, the infant will be viable in 6 weeks, not 9 months. And your body, it may not survive the birth. Varel went pale. Joran gripped the med scanner so hard it cracked. There has to be a way, he growled. Zal bowed. There is one. The Cradle of Ethel, a legendary birthing pod hidden in the sunken vault beneath the palace. It uses harmonic resonance to stabilize hybrid lifeforms. But it hasn't been activated in 500 years. And only royal blood can unlock it. Hope flickered. But accessing the vault required the Empress Dowager's key. The same dowager who had arranged the marriage but now watched them with cold scrutiny. Convinced Joran's influence weakened Solmari purity. When Varel begged for the key, the dowager refused. Let nature take its course, she said from her throne of black coral. If the child is meant to live, it will. If not, perhaps the prophecy was false, and your union a mistake. Joran nearly stormed the throne room. Varel stopped him. Violence won't open vaults, she said. But secrets might. That night, they broke into the dowager's private archive. Not to steal, but to uncover. Buried in encrypted logs, they found the truth. The dowager herself had once loved a non-Solmari, a blue-skinned navigator from the Andromeda Reach. Their child had died in infancy due to biological incompatibility. The dowager had sealed the cradle not out of tradition, but grief. Armed with this knowledge, Varel confronted her grandmother not as a princess, but as a granddaughter. You lost a child because no one helped you, she said, tears streaming. Don't make me lose mine because you're too afraid to hope again. The dowager's stern mask crumbled. Without a word, she handed over the key, a teardrop-shaped crystal pulsing with inner light. The descent into the sunken vault was treacherous. Ancient defense drones, dormant for centuries, reactivated at their intrusion. Joran fought them off with nothing but a plasma torch and sheer grit, shielding Varel as she navigated the shifting labyrinth. When they finally reached the cradle, a pearlescent pod humming with soft golden light, it responded instantly to Varel's touch, unfolding like a lotus. She entered. The pod sealed. Joran pressed his palm against the glass, whispering promises through the barrier. Days passed. The palace held its breath. Then, on the 7th dawn, the cradle glowed blinding white and opened. Inside lay not one infant, but 2. A girl with emerald skin and fiery orange curls, and a boy with olive-toned skin, dark hair, and faint green undertones in his cheeks. Both breathed steadily, wrapped in bioluminescent swaddling. Varel, weak but alive, reached for them. Lyra and Rian, she breathed. Joran wept openly. But their joy was short-lived. As the twins were presented to the court, a transmission burst through all channels, an emergency hail from the outer rim. The Kthar hive hadn't retreated. They'd been building something. a planet cracker weapon powered by stolen Solmari core tech. And its first target? The Celestial Dominion's capital world. Worse, the weapon required a living Solmari royal to activate its final sequence. Someone had given them Varel's genetic signature. Betrayal came from the last place they expected. Lady Morel, Varel's childhood handmaiden and closest confidant. Under interrogation, she confessed. She'd been blackmailed. The Cthar held her family hostage on a penal moon. I only gave them a hairbrush, she sobbed. I didn't know. Joran wanted to execute her. Varel stopped him. Mercy is our strength, she said. Not our weakness. Instead, they turned betrayal into bait. Using Morel as a double agent, they fed the Cthar false coordinates for a secret royal bunker. Meanwhile, Joran led a stealth strike team, composed of Terran mercenaries, Solmari rangers, and even reformed Cthar defectors, to sabotage the weapon's power core. The mission was brutal. In the icy caverns of Xylos Prime, Joran faced the Cthar warlord Threx, a hulking brute with 4 arms and venom-dripping fangs. Their duel was savage, blades clashing, plasma bolts scorching stone. But Joran fought not for glory, but for the lullaby Varel sang to their children each night. He won. Barely. Back on the capital world, Varel, still recovering, coordinated the planetary shield grid from the command throne. Lyra strapped to her chest in a sling, Rian sleeping in a hover cradle beside her. When the Cthar fleet emerged from warp, expecting a helpless world, they found every orbital cannon primed, every drone squadron active, and the skies blazing with defensive auroras. The battle lasted 12 hours. The Dominion held. In the aftermath, the Cthar hive fractured. Reformist factions rose, denouncing the warlords. Peace talks began, not dictated by emperors, but negotiated by soldiers, scientists, and mothers who'd lost too much. Months later, on the anniversary of their wedding, Joran and Varel stood on the palace balcony, watching their children chase moon-feathered avians through the garden. Lyra already showed signs of her father's curiosity, dismantling toy drones with tiny screwdrivers. Rian, quieter, could calm storms with his voice, a trait neither parent understood, but the oracle later confirmed. He was the earth who could soothe fire. Yet another twist waited in the stars. A distress signal arrived from deep space, an old Terran colony ship, long thought lost. Its log mentioned a survivor, Joran's younger sister, Lyra, presumed dead in the Dust Wastes plague. She'd been rescued by alien traders and raised among the nomadic void weavers. Joran was stunned. Varel saw the conflict in his eyes, the pull of past and present. Go, she said gently. Bring her home. He returned weeks later, not alone, but with Lyra and 3 orphaned weaver children she'd adopted. The palace expanded, not just in rooms, but in heart. Lyra became the Dominion's first Terran ambassador to the Outer Rim, while the weaver orphans learned Solmari songs and Terran jokes. Through it all, Joran never forgot where he came from, or who he'd become. He still made terrible pancakes, still knelt when meeting elders, still held Varel's hand during thunderstorms, even though she was the warrior and he the diplomat now. One evening, as the twins slept and the twin moons cast silver paths across the floor, Varel asked, "Do you ever regret it? Being pulled into this world?" Joran looked at her, at the woman who'd once feared him, now radiant with love and purpose, and smiled. "I used to think kindness was just returning what someone gave you. But you taught me it's about giving what someone needs, even if they don't know it yet." She leaned into him. Outside, the stars burned steady, no longer omens of doom, but witnesses to a love that defied species, shattered prophecies, and built a future not on thrones, but on tenderness. And somewhere in the galaxy, the Oracle of Zintra smiled, her vines blooming with white flowers, for the child of fire and earth had not only risen, but multiplied, weaving a new destiny for worlds once divided. But even as peace flourished, a new anomaly flickered on the Dominion's long-range sensors. A signal from beyond the known spiral arm, repeating a single phrase in ancient Solmari and Broken Terran. "They are coming. Prepare the twins." Joran and Varel exchanged a glance. Not fear, not dread, readiness, for their story wasn't ending. It was only beginning to echo across the stars. The mysterious signal pulsed for 7 cycles, always at midnight, always repeating the same phrase, "They are coming. Prepare the twins." At first, the Royal Science Directorate dismissed it as cosmic interference or a rogue AI echo from the old war. But when Lyra, barely walking, began murmuring the words in her sleep, and Rian's calming voice started resonating at frequencies that made palace crystals hum. The truth became undeniable. The message wasn't just heard, it was felt. Joran and Varel consulted every archive, every oracle, every deep space linguist. The phrase matched no known dialect until Lyra, poring over fragmented Terran myth data, found a match in an obscure pre-Exodus legend. The Starborn Covenant, a myth about ancient beings who seeded life across galaxies, then vanished, promising to return when their children faced extinction. But what chilled them most was the signature embedded in the signal, a genetic resonance pattern identical to the twins' combined DNA. One stormlit night, as violet lightning split the sky, the source revealed itself. A vessel unlike any ever recorded descended, not with engines but with silence. It shimmered like liquid obsidian, shaped like a double helix, hovering above the Sunstone courtyard without triggering a single alarm. From its core emerged not soldiers, not diplomats, but two figures. Tall, luminous, with skin like polished jade and hair that flowed like molten copper. Their eyes held galaxies. They called themselves the Ethel, the original architects of Solmari biology, and the hidden donors of the extremophile genes spliced into Earth's resilient strain centuries ago. "You were never accidents," the lead Ethel said, voice resonant yet gentle, addressing Joran and Varel. "You were convergence points. We engineered your lineages across millennia so that, in this age, fire and earth might unite." Varel stepped forward, shielding her children. "Why? What do you want?" "The galaxy is dying," the Ethel replied. "Not by war, but by entropy. The cosmic weave unravels. Only a hybrid soul born of starfire and stardust, of compassion and resilience, can reignite the core flame at the heart of creation. Your twins carry that potential, but only if they are taken now, before their power awakens fully and draws the Devourers." "The Devourers?" Joran asked, hand on his plasma blade. "Entities born of void and hunger," the Ethel said grimly. "They follow the light of nascent cosmic beings. They are already en route, faster than light, hungrier than time." Silence fell. Rain began to fall, warm and silver. Varel looked at Lyra, who was curiously reaching toward the Ethel, unafraid. Rian stood beside her, humming softly, the same frequency as the signal. They weren't just children. They were keys. The choice was unbearable. Keep them and risk annihilation, or surrender them to strangers who spoke of destiny like debt. Joran knelt, gathering both twins in his arms. "No," he said firmly. "If they're meant to save everything, they won't do it alone. We go with them." The Ethel hesitated. "Mortal bodies cannot survive the journey to the core." "We're not just mortal," Varel said, stepping beside Joran, her emerald skin glowing faintly with ancestral energy. "I am Solmari royal blood. He is resilient strain. And our love. That's something even your science can't measure." Something shifted in the Ethel's gaze. Respect. Perhaps even hope. "Then you must be transformed," they said. "Not into gods. Not into weapons. But into guardians. Bound to your children, your love, your armor." Without ceremony, the Ethel touched their foreheads. Light erupted, not blinding but embracing. Joran felt his bones hum with new harmonics. Varel's orange hair blazed like solar flares. Their bodies didn't change, but their essence did. They could now breathe vacuum, sense gravitational tides, speak in wavelengths beyond sound. The Devourers arrived hours later. Not ships, but rips in reality itself, yawning mouths of anti-light. But as they neared the capital world, the Ethel vessel rose, and from its heart shone the twins, cradled in their parents' arms. Lyra laughed, and her joy sent shockwaves of pure creation through space. Rian sang, and the fabric of spacetime stitched itself back together. The Devourers recoiled, not destroyed, but remembered. In the presence of true Genesis, even hunger bows to wonder. With the immediate threat quelled, the Ethel offered one final choice. Return to their quiet life on the capital world, with all memory of the cosmic truth gently veiled, or journey with the twins to the core flame, to raise them among the stars, preparing them for the day they would rekindle the universe's dying heart. Joran looked at Varel. She looked at their children. Then, together, they nodded. They didn't vanish forever. Every solstice, a shimmering vessel appears in the celestial dominion sky. Lyra beams down holos of alien nebulae she's painted with stardust. Rian sends lullabies that heal broken ecosystems. Lyra coordinates cultural exchanges between 100 species. always wearing a pendant forged from Terran iron and Solmari crystal. And though the palace gardens now hold 2 empty cradles beneath the moon-feathered avian's perch, they are never truly empty. For love, once kindled between a fearful princess and a gentle soldier, had grown so vast it became a beacon, one that guides lost souls, mends fractured worlds, and whispers to every lonely heart across the cosmos. You are seen, you are worthy, and kindness is the truest form of power. Years later, when historians wrote of the Great Convergence, they spoke of battles and prophecies, of alien queens and human grit. But those who knew the truth, the kitchen staff who shared pancakes with a future guardian, the stable children who played hide and seek with a cosmic heir, knew better. The real miracle wasn't in the stars. It was in the way a man knelt when he met a woman, and how she, in turn, finally learned to stand. Not as a princess, not as a weapon, but as a mother, a wife, and a light unto the universe. And so, beneath twin moons and endless skies, the story of Joran Vale and Princess Varel of House Solmara didn't end. It simply became part of everything. Years flowed like rivers of starlight through the halls of the celestial dominion, and Joran and Varel's love blossomed far beyond prophecy. The twins, Lyra and Rian, were only the beginning. One by one, their family grew, 7 children in all, each a miracle of fire and earth. There was Kaelin, who could coax plants to bloom in vacuum. Mira, whose laughter made gravity dance. Twin boys Terran and Soren, inseparable as orbiting moons. Little Alira, born with eyes that saw through time. And youngest of all, baby Dane, who hummed lullabies in the language of comets. Their palace became a home, walls echoing with bare feet, spilled stardust juice, and Joran's famously lopsided pancakes. Varel taught them Solmari star chants. Joran taught them Terran campfire songs and how to fix engines with gum and hope. They celebrated birthdays under meteor showers and studied galactic history curled together on floating couches. Peace held. Not because war vanished, but because their children carried both sword and kindness in equal measure. Lyra brokered treaties between warring nebula clans. Rian healed broken planets with his voice. The others followed their own paths, scientists, artists, explorers, but always returned for family dinners, where even emperors waited their turn to pass the spice-glazed root tubers. Joran never wore a crown, yet every being in the Dominion bowed not out of fear, but gratitude. Varel ruled with wisdom, but her proudest title was Mama. Their marriage, once forced, became legend, not for its grandeur, but for its quiet constancy. Shared glances across crowded rooms, hands clasped during storms, bedtime stories whispered long after the children pretended to sleep. When gray touched Joran's temples and silver threaded Varel's orange hair, they still walked the gardens at dawn, fingers entwined. Their children built homes nearby, filling the palace wings with grandchildren who called Joran Papa Star and Varel Grandfire. One evening, surrounded by 37 descendants, laughing, arguing, braiding hair, tinkering with toys, they sat on the sunstone balcony, watching the twin moons rise. No words were needed. The universe had demanded much, but given more. And as the stars shimmered above, Joran leaned close and whispered, "Still glad you married the human?" Varel smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I didn't marry a human," she said softly. "I married my home." And in that moment, beneath endless skies, their story ended exactly as it began, with kindness, with love, and with a family that spanned worlds.